Advantage Plus has sort of thrown a spanner in the works of how this sort of scaling can happen. So obviously Meta is really pushing us to be in this sort of Advantage Plus ecosystem, one campaign, one audience, all of your ad creative in that one campaign. If budget does want to increase because everything's going well, what happens if you touch it? You are now resetting everything. That one campaign that's been driving all of your sales has a wobble. That's really scary. Hi, and welcome to the Bright Minds of eCommerce podcast. I'm Dahna, founder of Bright Red Marketing, and I created this podcast because I wanted to bring you the best advice from Australian experts in e-commerce and e-commerce store owners. If you're wanting relatable stories and actionable advice, as well as the latest Facebook advertising strategies, you're in the right place. So let's get into today's episode. Hi, and welcome to the Bright Minds of eCommerce podcast. Today you're here with me. I'm Dahna from Bright Red Marketing. Most people think that scaling means spending more, and it doesn't. Scaling means spending smarter and more strategically, and oftentimes means spending more. And at the end of the day, Meta has made that significantly harder than it used to be with the way that they are encouraging us to set up accounts. So what I want to do in this episode is talk to you about the difference between the two ways that you can scale your account, my favorite, and then what you can do with these changes. So firstly, there's two different ways that you can scale your account. So there is horizontal scaling and vertical scaling. Now, if you've ever heard me speak before, you will know that I am a massive fan of horizontal scaling. Now, the challenge is that horizontal scaling works better with your traditional testing structures. So when we used to do audiences, interest-based audiences, lookalike audiences, really got into that audience testing. Now, we still see that working really successfully for a number of clients, but we are definitely seeing a push to these more Advantage Plus style campaigns where we have a lot more leverage. Now, unfortunately, having a lot less leverage means horizontal scaling became so much more difficult, which means we are stuck in theory with vertical scaling. And the problem with vertical scaling is, as you will have noticed if you've ever run a Meta ad before, anytime you touch anything at the campaign or audience level in Meta, things tend to get a bit wobbly. So what I'm going to do today is talk you through those two different kinds of scaling and my suggestions on how you can safely and more securely scale if you are in an Advantage Plus. If you are using a more traditional structure, I'm going to talk you how to do that as well. So first things first, horizontal scaling essentially means that you are adding more campaigns and ad sets targeting slightly different audiences as a way to spend more strategically without touching the campaigns that are already working. Now, the reason that this is my preference and always has been my preference is because of that last part. The thing that's already working doesn't get touched. So I'm not a massive believer in the learning phase that Meta likes to harp on about. I find that most of our clients kind of never get out of the learning phase, or they often don't. But there is still something to be said that if you are in that learning phase or you make changes, Meta gets a bit wobbly. So we want to try and avoid that as much as possible. So essentially with a horizontal campaign, we're basically looking at going, how can I add additional audiences that are similar but different enough to the existing audience to test that and increase the budget of the new audience or campaign, depending on how you've set it up, so that you are scaling and increasing budget without affecting the thing that's working. So the ways to do that is if interest-based audiences are working really well, can you try a different interest-based audience? If lookalike audiences are working really well, can you try a different lookalike audience? So that's your horizontal scaling. So vertical scaling is what people think of when you think of scaling, which is to increase the budget of something that's already working. Now, as I've already said, the challenge with this is anytime you change that, it does disrupt things. There are so many people out there that have a magic number. I've heard anything from 10% to 12.5% to 30% to $50 in terms of amounts that you can adjust and scale without it disrupting Meta. I have never found any of these to be particularly foolproof. There are always wobbles. There are often wobbles. Let's go with often, because there are sometimes when just adding more budget does really work. Usually that's a perfect storm sort of situation. The timing is right, the creative is right, the audience is right, sort of that magic perfect storm of things where you can really quite rapidly scale. Those are sort of magical, mystical times, and we do love those. But that vertical scaling is very much that. Add more budget, hope for the best. So I do think that moving forward and long term, the best scenario and the thing that we're going to find working the best is a sort of combination of these two. Now, as I sort of mentioned before, Advantage Plus has sort of thrown a spanner in the works of how this sort of scaling can happen. So obviously Meta is really pushing us to be in this sort of Advantage Plus ecosystem, one campaign, one audience, all of your ad creative in that one campaign. Now, you can see where I'm going with this. If that happens and your budget does want to increase because everything's going well, what happens if you touch it? You are now resetting everything. That one campaign that's been driving all of your sales has a wobble. That's really scary. That's scary whether you're spending $50 a day or you're spending $5,000 a day. That wobble is always terrifying. So what I want to talk through today is some options for scaling if you are running Advantage Plus campaigns that I think are a little bit safer and a little bit more stable. So before I get into that, because they kind of follow on, let's go through what I would suggest if you're doing your manual campaigns. So if you've got a manual targeted campaign, so you're doing lookalike interest, those sorts of things, the things I would have a look at there is your interest stacks. So I sort of mentioned this before. If a particular interest-based audience is working really well, I want you to have a think about why you think that particular interest-based audience is working. Now, the reason that I am still a firm believer in interest-based audiences is because they work. But what's not working is your old school audiences. So if you've got an interest-based audience with 2 or 3 interests in there, they're pretty generic. Maybe you sell yoga mats and you're targeting people who go to the gym and who like yoga. That's what I would call a really basic interest. So the people that are engaging with your brand, they probably like yoga, they probably go to the gym. Cool, we knew that. What we don't know is what Facebook doesn't know. So you're a yoga mat brand. Meta's probably got a pretty good idea of, the people that are going to be interested in your brand probably like yoga. But your brand, hopefully, is a little bit more complicated than that. There's a particular niche or a particular window in that yoga mat space that's a little bit more interesting. Now, you might have made your yoga mat out of some fancy new material that maybe it's vegan. So then what you're going to do is go, okay, we're going to go these people who also have an interest in, a vegan eating lifestyle. Maybe your yoga mats have got book quotes on them. So now we want to go, okay, well, people who like yoga but are also in the bookish space. Maybe you've got a yoga mat that, is for travelers or photographers, or what's the thing? So we call these our weird and wacky audiences. So essentially it's, yes, my audience likes my product because they like the thing that I'm selling, but specifically why my product? And I think this is where a lot of businesses struggle because they just sell a yoga mat. Now you've got to really think about what your business does, who's it for, what situations are they in? We do this a lot with our fashion clients where they go, oh, we sell beautiful dresses, and we go, okay, but at your price point, they're a different kind of dress. Like, we're not targeting the people that are buying things from Shein and Temu. We're going after high-end brands. So it's not as simple as targeting other high-end brands. It's like, what do people that have the kind of money to buy your luxury dresses, what else do they like? Do they like traveling? Are they having long wine lunches? And what is it that they're doing that is on top of that? Because Facebook is really good at looking at your website and going, cool, she sells dresses. What Facebook doesn't necessarily be as good at is knowing the exact demographic that you're going after. So Facebook's going to be really good at going, cool, fashion, done. So there's not really any point to running an interest-based audience that goes fashion. But there might be a point to going, okay, people who are into fashion, but maybe they're into interior design, and like really, really playing with that. So if you are running those sort of manual campaigns, trying some different interest stacks, that's where you're going to see the most success. Running just, a couple of interests and throwing them in one is not the way it works anymore. What you're trying to do is give Facebook information it doesn't already have. That's where that success of interest-based audience is coming from and is still working quite successfully for many brands. Obviously, if your lookalike audiences are working really well, having a look at different lookalike audiences, separating out your cold and warm, and adding sort of exclusions and things there can be also a really good way of adding additional audiences, and then obviously being able to use those for your scaling. So now that we've talked about that, this is where we get into the good stuff of how you can actually start to scale your Advantage Plus and sort of take back some of those controls. So the point of an Advantage Plus campaign is to give all of that control to Meta, right? So we say, this is my pixel, this is my website, this is my creative. Use that creative as your targeting. Now, if you are a really, really big brand, Meta is going to have a much better idea of what a potential customer looks like for you. The problem is that those are really, really big brands. And if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably not the CEO of Nike. If you are the CEO of Nike, hi, welcome. It's nice to have you here. But most of you are going to be running smaller brands. You're more my kind of people. Sorry, CEO of Nike, but you're going to be my kind of people. We're building businesses for our families. We're building businesses for our lifestyles. We have some good goals, but we're not trying to take over the world. So when you're that kind of business, Meta doesn't have the level and caliber of data it does for someone like Nike. So what we need to do is rely on Meta to give us that information, but it's not always got the best information. So that's where we kind of go, okay, let's play with this a little bit and see what we can do, because a straight up Advantage Plus sometimes works really well. Sometimes it can be doing some things we don't necessarily like, and sometimes it can do some things, but it's not spending the money where we want it, which is where the scaling conversation comes in. So if you've got a traditional Advantage Plus, one campaign, one audience, whole bunch of ads in there, and you're like, this is going amazing, I want to scale this. My suggestion is you don't necessarily touch that one. Let's expand, let's filter, let's see what we can do instead. So the easiest ones to do are your age and gender splits and your country and region splits. And what I mean by that is if you sell a product to multiple age ranges or to different genders, to actually separate that campaign out into the one that's maybe not getting as much spend. So for instance, if you sell a product to both men and women and you've got your Advantage Plus running and you notice that it's only spending 10% of your budget to men, but you actually have quite a decent line of men's pieces, you make good money on that, what I would suggest doing is leave that first one alone for now, duplicating that campaign and making this one specifically for men. So we're going to add in that age, so we're going to add in that gender filter. And what we're going to do is make sure all of that creative specifically targets men. So we're going to show off the men's products. We're going to have male models in there. We're going to really, really heavily focus that on men. Now, what that allows us to do is the campaign that's doing really well doesn't get touched. But we're taking this sort of untapped market and going, look, I know that Meta knows that this exists, but we're going to do this really well and we're going to do this much better. So we're going to put more budget behind it and we're going to do the creative very differently. What this does is it's allowed you now to scale in a sustainable way without breaking the thing that's already bringing you in all the money. Same thing applies for age. If you've got a product range that has a wide age range in terms of maybe you've got some products that skew younger, you've got some products that skew older, or you've got different aged models, those sorts of things, you can really start to pull these out. Again, when you go into that breakdown data, you can see, okay, well, this Advantage Plus campaign is spending really heavily on my older demographic, but I really want to spend and like really grow that younger demographic base as well. So if the younger one's not getting the spend that you would like, you can pull that one out and then go, cool, here are all of our youngest models. Here are the products that the younger demographics are buying. And you can then start to build out that second category. So that's your age and gender splits. Your country and region splits are also really interesting. So if you are internationally scaling or you can sell to different countries, I highly recommend that each of those countries is in its own separate Advantage Plus, for the simple fact that even just across countries, the language is different. And I'm speaking just within the Western countries. So the English spelling, the American spelling, it's different. People will respond best when it is spoken in their language, their typing, their spelling is the word I was looking for. But also the way that these countries respond to marketing is wildly different. We have a client that targets both Australia and the US, and the way in which their funnel content works is completely flipped, Australia to the US. So I don't know that this is the correct split, but the concept is the same. So in Australia, their UGC does wildly better at top of funnel for their colder audience versus static graphics for their middle of funnel. In America, it's completely flipped. Again, that might not be the actual way that goes, but the concept is the same. So the UGC does really, really well for cold in Australia versus working much, much better in that warmer audience in the other country. So being able to split those countries out in your Advantage Plus campaigns gives you that control back. You get the control of where they're seeing content, what kind of content, spelling, those sorts of things. Even as simple as Americans are more receptive, a more aggressive marketing, whereas Australians, no. You need to be a lot more chill, you need to be a lot more casual, take a little bit more, fun with it. So like even just that, like the creative is going to be a little bit different country to country. But also having your countries split out gives you the ability to set up a stable base. Now, that is the thing we are trying to do with any horizontal scaling, is to set up a stable base. We don't want to have all of our eggs in literally one campaign basket. We talk about not having all of your eggs in the meta basket. We really don't want to have all of our eggs in one meta basket that relies on one campaign. If that one campaign has any problems, if you try and scale that campaign and everything falls apart, you're in big trouble. So we want to make sure that we've got a really nice stable base. Now, one campaign, not a stable base. To be honest, two campaigns, not a particularly stable base. We don't start getting stable until we get it to that 3 or 4 mark. But because Meta is pushing us towards Advantage Plus, it's getting harder to sort of navigate those 3 or 4. So being able to create some of these different splits starts to give you a little bit more stability so that you can then have those campaigns scale that way too as much as you can. And then you can start to vertically scale some of these ones without the whole thing crashing if one of them has a bit of a wobble or doesn't perform at that new budget. The other thing that's really interesting to do is a product line split. So if you've got some different products on your website, and this won't apply to everyone, but if you've got some different ranges, so this doesn't particularly work in fashion in the way that you might think. So like we don't want to have a campaign on blouses and a different one on skirts and a different one on trousers, but you could have them on different collections. You could have them on, let's say you did like handbags and things, you might have your handbag line and you might have a luggage line. Like they're going to be different. You're going to market those two things differently. So it can be really interesting to start to split out your product lines. The thing you need to be careful of with this one particularly is that you have enough creative to back this up. You don't want to split these out and then not have enough unique pieces of creative to promote each individual one. So I really like a product line split. I think it's one of the safest ways of scaling, especially if you've got diverse product ranges, especially if you've got enough content for each of those. It can be a really, really great way to grow your business really safely. And also if a product line sells out, if it's not seasonal, you're not turning everything off, because you can kind of start to play with the pieces of the puzzle. So I really, really like that one. The other one that's worth mentioning is something that I'm seeing a lot of people talking about at the moment, which is to actually separate these out by avatars. Now, I have historically not been a massive fan of avatars because I find that most people that talk about avatars kind of miss the boat. And it isn't as clear. So I'm going to be very clear with this. If you're going to test by avatars, they need to be wildly different people. This is not Susie likes to go to yoga on Sundays and Laura likes to go to Pilates on Tuesdays. Those are not two different avatars. We need to have like John likes to do yoga after he's gone and done his tradie business, and Susie who goes to Pilates on Tuesday. Like we've got two wildly different people. So keep that in mind if you are going to test these avatars. It has to be wildly different people that we're going after. So similar to the product line split, you also need to make sure you have enough creative for that, and you need to have the content to back it up regularly. But I do really like where that's going, and I definitely think that's going to be applicable for some of these bigger brands as they're scaling, or your brand as you scale. Now, just to clarify, so the different ways of scaling your Advantage Plus, we can do age and gender splits, we can do country splits, product line splits, or creating splits by avatar, but be careful with that one. But there are some really nice, healthy ways to start sort of scaling that Advantage Plus ecosystem horizontally, which again gives you a really nice solid foundation to start increasing vertically. If you start to do this, Meta will start to get a bit cranky with you. You are breaking the rules. You're not playing their game. They'll start talking to you about things like budget fragmentation, and you're competing against yourself. But what I want you to know is that Facebook is trying to get you to simplify things as much as possible. You know your business, you know your results, you know what your targets are. If you do this and you're getting results, don't worry about it. If you do this and you're not getting results, that's when you use that information, make some decisions, do some testing, try something else. I'm not sitting here saying the only way to scale is to add product line splits and then it doesn't work and you go, cool, that failed, Dahna doesn't know what she's talking about. Everything that I ever do and everything I ever talk about is testing. Test it, see what works, test something else, see what works. We're always testing to see what's working best for your business. Now, I know you're going to ask, what do I do budget-wise? My suggestion and rule of thumb here is the scaling or the increase in that horizontal scaling should be equal to or slightly more than the current campaign. So if you're spending $100 a day on your general Advantage Plus campaign and you want to try a horizontal scale into a different country, a region, a gender split, a product split, an avatar split, what you want to do with that is at least the same, if not a little bit more. The idea here is to scale, right? So if you're spending $100 a day on your Advantage Plus campaign, it's going beautifully, it's working amazing. don't start the next one at $20 a day. That's not the point. The point is to sort of grow the business and scale. If you do the first test and you go, cool, this is working really well, but the frequency's high, then you can start to pull it back a little bit. But generally speaking, when we're having these conversations, it's because things are going really well and we want to scale. The only caveat I will make to that is scaling is for when things are going really well. We don't want to start spending more money if things are not working. So just keep that in mind. When it comes to vertically scaling, there is sort of no rule of thumb. You will hear lots of people say, 10% here, 12% here. We tend to move things up $50 to $100 a day increments, depending on how much the account is spending. Give it a couple of days, let it wobble, let it see what it's doing. Once the wobble is finished, do it again. There is no hard and fast rule. Anyone who tells you there is, I don't believe them. I'm so sorry. I've been doing this a very long time. Sometimes there's a wobble. Sometimes there's not a wobble. Sometimes the wobble lasts a day. Sometimes it lasts 3 weeks. Sometimes the wobble is unreconcilable and we need to pull it all back. So keep in mind what's happening in your account. Don't worry about everyone else's. Take money that you can afford to spend. Make sure it's profitable for you and you will be happy days. So at the end of the day, Meta is just trying to take back so much of that control. And our job as advertisers and business owners is to find the places that control is still important for us. Control still makes a difference and control gives us something back. There's no point trying to take control from things that are irrelevant or don't actually help us. But scaling and being able to scale safely and sustainably is definitely something that is worth taking some of that control back. So happy scaling, and I hope you learned something. Thank you for listening to the Bright Minds of E-commerce podcast. As always, you can find the show notes on our website at brightredmarketing.com.au. Just look for the podcast page. Thanks for listening.